This screencast, I'm going to show you how I go in and check student work for plagiarism. At, in the tests section, what I do for each of the chapter exams is this. For example, with chapter 1, here's the exam, which is all the true, false, multiple choice, objective style questions that I use to test students on the chapter 1 material. Well, because of the way Advance is set up, it's not easy for me to put a random block of essays also on that same exam. So what I did was I created a second assignment, essentially, called the Chapter 1 essay right here. And so I explained that briefly in the last screencast I did, explaining how I set up tests inside of Advance. But essentially what this is it's a series of essay questions based on the Chapter 1 material, and each student, when they access this assignment, they get one of those essays. So it pulls it up. They have several days to work on a response for that essay, and then once they submit their response and I go in to grade it, you can go into the review and grade. Since this is in our OTC Practicum course, there's no users have completed this, but basically once there are students that have completed this, I can go in, click on their submission. I can go in and grade it. If any of those essays, if I read something that just doesn't seem like it reads as if it's been copied, what I do is there's a button that isn't showing on this particular view, but there's a button where I can send that essay over to Turnitin. Turnitin is this website. It's a plagiarism detection company that the information, the essay that the student submitted is sent over here, and here's some examples of ones that I've done for my Bio 35 class this semester. And because it has a link to Advance, it automatically sets up a course with the correct course title. You go into that course, it puts the title for the essay from that it's pulled from Advance. And then if we go down, like for example, chapter 24 essay down here, if we go in and view it, there were a couple students that when I read their essays, they sounded like they potentially could have been plagiarized, so I sent those over here, and it gives me an idea of what sort of potential plagiarism there was on that essay. In the case of this first student, it didn't detect anything based on the different sources, textbooks, online resources, things like that Turnitin checks the submission against. But this student, there was a fair amount. It 28%. It categorizes that as a yellow, which means you may want to take a look at it. So if I pull that up and look at it, it pulls up a separate window where it shows what the student submitted, and then it gives you an idea of how much 17% versus 11% for these couple different sources over here. So I can go in and kind of look at what it matched and say, well, this is just some coding that got pulled over from Advance, so that's no big deal. And then this one sentence, there was some of this one sentence looks like it was submitted by a student at a different Republic Polytechnic, another school that uses this service. So I'm not too concerned that this was it was just sort of random, unintentional plagiarism. There wasn't anything out of the ordinary here. So I just close that window back up. And so that's how I can go in and check. It's nice because anything that you submit in here is saved for future classes. So if, say, a student takes my class in the fall and does a good job on their essays, and then gives those answers to a student in the spring. If that student in the spring happens to get the same essays, they could potentially use the same answers, but this would detect that that answer was copied from a previous semester, and so it keeps a history of all this. Now that I've tested this out with linking Turnitin to Advance and see that it does work pretty well, the link between the two programs works pretty well, I plan on submitting everything. There's a button that I can do once I have a list of students here that have completed the essay for that chapter. I can I can hit a button that says submit all to Turnitin. So that way everybody in the class, it automatically gets submitted. It takes a little while for the Turnitin website to process it, but once it's done, then I have a report on every student, every essay, and I'll have that history being built up inside the Turnitin software. So it's a very powerful tool, and unfortunately, I have caught several students that have blatantly plagiarized from the internet or from previous classes, and we've had to take disciplinary actions at times. But generally, if the students know up front that this is part of the process, then I don't get a whole lot of at least intentional plagiarism. There's a little bit from copying things from the book, but it's usually pretty minor. So anyways, that's how I help to make sure the test questions I'm using, the essay questions I'm using, are reliable.